test. I said I'll shout. You're very good at shouting. All right. Got a bad temper. Welcome to the 36th anniversary of Barbara's stay at Avatars Abode. When Francis Brabazon first met Barbara in 1952 in New York, he'd already decided that one day there would be a possibility, however remote, that the Avatar might come to Australia. So around about 1950, he started building something special, just in case. And the principle that he worked on was that if you do it yourself, then you put something into it. So he learned how to cut stone from a stonemason, and slowly over 6 years built a stone house to last 700 years, just in case the Avatar came. Well, he did happen to come, and he stayed in that house, which is now known as Mayor House, the Beacon Hill. So when Baba, out of the blue, he was in seclusion, said that he would share his company with people, even though he was in seclusion, with those who loved him and were willing to obey him, and said that he would stay either in Sydney or Queensland. So Francis grasped the opportunity. He's coming twice. We'll build another house for him. 2 places. They had to be new. So eventually he found this farm. At the farmhouse, that would be for other people. A new place had to be built for Barbara. Once, Barbara he went north to a place he'd never been before, with the Mandali. And whilst there, he told Ramju that he was going to have a program, and he gave Ramju the job of organising a program. He said, I want something bright, happy, cheerful. Let's give the people a bit of entertainment. So Ramju scouted around this unknown town, city or whatever it was, organised food, singers, dancers, musicians. And so Baba had a show, a darshan program, and Baba gave them this entertainment and food. And Baba said at the end of it, he told Ramju, oh, it's a lovely program. Beautiful food, and the music and the dancing was wonderful. A couple of months later, he was back in Marathon, and he decided to have a program there. This time he gave the job to Pendu. Well, it was different for Pendu. There was all these Baba people around, so he got this one to cook the food, and that one to do this, and got singers and dancers and musicians, and put on a show. Another lovely program. Afterwards, Baba was sitting with the Mandali, and he said, Ramju, which do you think was the best program, yours or Pendu? And Ramju said, oh, Pendu. Baba said, your program, Ramju, was beautiful. It was was beautiful. It was entertaining, had life, etc., etc. But he said, Pendu's was done with people who love me, so there was a different flavour. So Pendu's was better than yours. This principle was a principle that Francis had, and that's something he tried to train us to. So when he found this farm and decided to build a place for Baba, he could have employed a professional builder, but he didn't. He wanted people to give people the opportunity to make a contribution. So after he found this property, just by coincidence, an old friend from Melbourne, Roy Balch, and his wife, Merrill, another old friend, just happened to be at Maroochydore at the time. Now Roy was a bloke who worked for the Victorian Railways, and he was a bloke who could think with his hands. And that's not a derogatory statement, because people can think with their hands, make the physical world work. But you could give Roy a piece of timber or a piece of metal and say, make this, make that, and he could make it. So he was the ideal man for what was on at Avatars Abode. He had 6 years to build Beacon Hill, Mayor House of Beacon Hill. He had less than 6 months to build a new place for barbecue. So Roy was here, that was the start. So Francis sent the message out. He could do with help. One of the first persons to come to the aid of the party happened to be the maitre d' of the Sapphire Room of the Hotel Australia. But he could work with his hands too. He built his own house, Reg Paffel. And also by coincidence, a young man who'd met Barbara in '56 and then disappeared into the wilds of Australia, working on railways, rouseabout at a shearing shed. At that time, wrote to Francis and said he'd like to do some more work at Beacon Hill. Francis said, don't worry about Beacon Hill, come to Keel Mountain. So that was the team. Who was the man? I'm sorry, Jack Painter. So that was the team that started building the place. Towards the end of March, Lorna Rouse with baby Rada came up so she could do the cooking and the washing and looking after the house. So the men could get out 7:30 in the morning and not have to worry about anything else except hard yakka until 5:30 at night. Barbara said to Francis later, you did all this in that amount of time? What daring! Towards the end of April, Diana Snow came, Robert Rouse and Lorna's brother, Ken Davis, then May, and then after that a whole stream of people. And everyone was given something to do. Everyone was given some opportunity to participate in preparing the place for his visit. It has been said in print that there was loving cooperation went on, everyone worked together for Barbara. And that's true. But of course, with people working so hard and for so long hours, 6 days a week, naturally tempers got frayed, people got upset, ideal material for Barbara. So you had the situation where one woman was saying to another, that bitch so-and-so and so-and-so. And one bloke's talking about another bloke saying, I'll kill him, as he shoveled calming tablets down his throat. One day Francis was out working on the job, but he had to go and buy more materials and food. And he came marching into the house and said to Lorna, "Right, I'm off. Have you got the list, the shopping list?" "No, I haven't, Francis. I've just finished the wash. I've done the washing. I've been doing the washing, and I've just got rather down to sleep." Too late, he says. And Lorna said, "Well, in that case, you don't eat." Well, that brought out the Paddy in Francis Brabazon. He said, "You might as well have said, 'To hell with a lot of you.'" Well, that brought out the Irish ancestry in Lorna. "All right, to hell with a lot of you." So Francis marches off. A quarter of an hour later, he comes back. Oh, Lorna. "Oh, yes, Francis, I've got the list." "Oh, good, I'll go now." Okay. We all eat. The point being that under those stressful conditions, etc., etc., having had their say, that was the finish of it. No animus was held. Back to the job of lovingly cooperating to prepare the place for him. Something that Baba noted when he was here. So, Francis Brabazon, Bill LePage and John Bruford left to go and bring Baba from Brisbane. Francis calculated on the time that they would probably leave the hotel in Brisbane around about 9 o'clock in the morning, that they would get here around about 11:30. In those days it was about a 2-hour trip from Brisbane, and we're carrying Baba, so we're going to drive very sedately. And as a precaution, a lookout was appointed around about the time when Baba would be due, to keep an eye down the road and warn people when he was coming. As they were driving up the road, John Bruford was driving Baba. Now, John Bruford was a man who had a gammy leg. He'd had polio when he was young, and so he had a specially adapted car, but John was mad about driving. He loved driving. He used to go to the Formula race car, and he admired people like Stirling Moss, Fritz Lang, and he studied the art of driving. So some people used to say he was a fast driver. John said he was a careful driver. He drove within what he knew were the limits of his capacity and the capacity of the car. Okay, he's driving Baba. So he's driving at a lot slower speed than he normally would. Sometime into the journey, tap on the shoulder. Baba says, "Oh, another 5 miles per hour." After a little while, another tap on the shoulder. Faster. So John speeds up. 3rd tap on the shoulder. John got the message. Be yourself. Drive with your usual care and attention, but be yourself. So, vroom. So by the time they got near Beer Burrum, Francis was starting to panic. We're well ahead of time. So he stopped the car at a petrol station at Beer Burrum, rang Lorna and said, "We're going to be early." So the message went out, "We're going to be early." The lookout was sent, "We're going to be early." But there were still some tardy folk, men, of course, still at the tents, jacking tools, getting ready. And suddenly the cockatoo runs up the road. "Baba's coming, Baba's coming." So they, sudden panic. All those who were ready had then the delightful spectacle of a short, sharp cattle stampede down the road, followed by the drover in a sedate white car. When Barbara arrived at the Barber house, Francis, who thought, well, you know, Barbara's had a long trip, he'll be tired, we don't want a lot of people around, had ordered that everyone wait down at the farmhouse. So when Barbara arrived at the Barber house, he looked around and said, "Where are my lovers?" Short, sharp message down to the farmhouse. "Come, immediate more." So we all piled up and we had our first little session with Barbara in the meeting hall. One of the first things Barbara spoke about was he asked Francis who owned the property. Francis explained that he had bought the property, but now he was giving it to Barbara. "It is your property now, Barbara," Francis said. Barbara accepted the property and then handed it back to Francis, saying, quote, "I hold no goods or property." "8 years later, the meaning of the word obedience, and you can read all the details of that in John Grant's book. I just want to run through certain things that I want to introduce to you. So we'll jump now to Wednesday morning. In the Wednesday morning there was individual sessions. Either an individual or a family would meet for a special session with Barbara. When it was all over, or when we thought it was all over, there was a call for Robert and Lorna Rouse and John and Joan Bruford. And we sort of said, "I wonder what Barbara wanted." Anyway, another session with Barbara. Well, we were in for a surprise. We went into Barbara's room in the Barber house. Barbara was sitting on the bed. There was Erich and Francis. And Barbara didn't beat about the bush. He came straight out and asked each individual, starting with myself, "Are you willing to come to Avatars Abode, settle there and farm the property?" Well, he got naturally an agreement from everyone. No trouble. When we came out, Francis was so pleased that Barbara had asked us, and he just felt happy. So he gave me an embrace and he said, in his personal session that morning, that Barbara had said he would be calling Francis to India. So Francis was really looking forward to that as a possibility. Well, not a possibility, but that he would be going to India. That afternoon, we had a general session in the Barber house, everyone sitting on wooden planks, supported by kerosene cans, because there was no electricity, so we had kerosene for the fridge, kerosene for light, kerosene for primer stoves. We had plenty of kerosene cans. And whilst we were sitting there in that session with Barbara said, quote, "I feel the love that has gone into preparing this place." And then he said, "I name this property Avatars Abode." The next morning, Barbara visited the farmhouse where the women were staying and the tent site, which is now the Bruford house where the men were staying. And we had a session with Barbara. At the end of that, we broke for lunch and we were told to reassemble at 1 o'clock. It was a bright sunny day, just like today. You can't hear?
They can't hear you at the back.
Oh, I'm sorry. Perhaps I should use the mic.
Yes.
Sorry.
Sam, is it all?
Yeah, it should be right.
I can hear okay up here, so
Yeah.
I don't hear all that well. So.
Start again, Robert.
Well, help! Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
The message is coming through loud and clear. So we broke for lunch. When we came back, Barbara was sitting on a chair in the sun on the veranda. And the first of us who came whizzing round the corner got a fright, because here was a barber we'd never seen before. Here was a tiger ready to leap out. I came round the corner, saw Barber, stopped and took one step back. Anyway, there were more brave souls who sort of wandered around with their cameras wondering, and Eric said, yeah, go ahead. So they took photographs, and those photographs taken of Barber, there's some of them in the foyer, almost in the same position where Barber was sitting. And there's also some taken by Colin Adams, reproduced in the latest newsletter. So after Barber had been sitting there, he decided, it being a sunny day, the first real sunny day we'd had, he would go for a little walk. So, assisted by Erich and occasionally Nariman, he walked to the northeast corner of the Barber house. And in those days, the trees were a lot lower, and you can see the sea there now, but in those days it was very clear. And so Barber admired the fact that he could see the sea, and so therefore he was told that from the highest point on Avatars Abode, the tree point, up where the pine trees are now, you could also see the mountains, but we couldn't take Barber there because of his hip. And Barber liked the idea that you could see both the sea and the mountains from Avatars Abode. So round about now, Francis got rather spiritually excited and said rather grandly, Barber, one day the whole mountain will be yours. Barber chuckled and leant across and twigged his left ear, as if to say, isn't he sweet? The whole universe is mine. A couple of years later, Joan Bruford, looking at a map of Avatars Abode, a plan, noticed that the rectangle made by the west, north and east boundary had a little piece out of it, 12 acres, which was part of a block of land that went down into the valley and over to the other side, to the other end of Kill Mountain Road. So she wrote to Barber and offered to buy, thinking, because that 12 acres was the last of the highest part of Kill Mountain, highest part of Avatars Abode. Then it dropped away. Well, she thought maybe someday some developer will come in and right next to Avatars Abode take off that corner, and there could even be apartments. So she offered to buy that, either the 12 acres or the whole 40 acres. Barber accepted 12 acres to be added to Avatars Abode, saying, that's enough land for Avatars Abode. And whilst he was standing there at that northeast corner, Barber said, and I quote, in 700 years' time, Avatars Abode will become a place of world pilgrimage. And I can remember thinking to myself at the time, Barber's little joke. In 700 years' time, the whole world will be flocking here, and he'll be back. Other image, other name, same doctrine of Sariputta, in another place. The next day, Barber was due to leave on the Friday. Now, it's been printed a number of times. The Barber left at 1 o'clock, around about 1 o'clock. What actually happened was, we were told to assemble at 1 p.m. in what Francis called the Barber Square. It's a true square, a true geometrical square is involved. And whilst we waited there, while the Mundaley, Francis, Bill and John got cars ready and baggage, etc. for Barber's departure, because they were going to take him to Sydney. And at one stage, Barber came to the door of the Barber house and we said farewell to Barber by kissing his hand. Around about 1:45, there was a call for Robert and Lorna Rouse to come in. So we went in. Everyone else was busy with something else. Barber was standing with their each in the middle of the main hall of the Barber house. And he spoke to us about our coming to Avatars Abode and gave us instructions, amongst which he said, quote, "Look after Avatars Abode during Francis' absence." And I can remember thinking to myself, oh, if Francis is lucky, we'll have to look after the place for a couple of months. If he's really lucky, 3 or 4 months. He also said that he wanted Robert to go with him to Sydney, and then he handed the key of the Barber house to Lorna and told her, instructed her, that when he left she was to lock the Barber house, to tell all to keep away from the Barber house, and no one was allowed to enter for 24 hours. So when we were dismissed from Barber's presence, I had to race up to the tent site, have the fastest bath in history, grab a few things, come back in time to pile into the back of the Fiat with all the luggage. Now when people say, when did Barber leave Avatars Abode? I always say 2:30, and that was probably the time that Barber's car crossed the border into Queensland. But the exact time his car started moving, I know very well for 2 reasons. One was, the moment the car started moving, I looked at my watch. The other reason was that the next day we arrived in Sydney at 10 o'clock. Barber's plane to Bombay didn't leave till 10:30. So we all camped at Beacon Hill. And in the afternoon, the 4 Australians were seated before Barber, and he's talking to us. Suddenly he says, "Robert, what's the time?" So I looked at my watch. The minute hand was somewhere between 22 and 23 minutes to 3. I was young and eager in those days, and wishing to appear dynamic and on the ball, I didn't bother to work out the finer details. I grabbed at the nearest round figure and said, "It's 20 to 3, Barber." Barber goes on talking for a while. Then he says, "Robert, what's the time now?" I looked at my watch. "It's exactly 20 minutes to 3.
Oh.
Well, there's no escape. It's 20 to 3, Barber. "Amazing," says Barber. "Here we are all sitting and talking. How can time has stood still?" So I can state categorically that Barber's car started moving at 25 minutes past 2. So Barber left, went back to India. Francis, the Rouses and the Brufords settled into residence at Avatars Abode. Only Francis didn't really settle, of course. He was sweating on that call to India. And Barber made him wait. Well, no one knows why Barber does anything. Perhaps Barber was waiting for Francis because, by coincidence, Barber's call to Francis came when Francis had finally finished making the last-minute corrections of the second typed version of Stay With God And Lorna had typed up the last papers and he'd finished. And he was thrilled not only to be going for whatever time it was with Barbara, but he could take with him the finished, completed manuscript of Stay with God. So Francis went off. Neither he nor we knew how long he would be. And by August 1959, he was still there. And one day Barbara said, Francis, tomorrow morning is your morning. You can ask any question you want to ask. We will discuss anything you wish to discuss. So the next morning, Francis had his little session. Actually, it was a 2-hour session. And naturally, Avatars Abode was a subject for discussion. During which Barbara said, and I quote, Avatars Abode will one day become a real abode of God. And Francis, remembering what Barbara had said while standing at the corner of the Barbara house, told Barbara, informed Barbara, that he'd said something like that when he was there, but that he'd said it in the context of 700 years. Barbara said, don't worry about 700 years, Francis. Avatars Abode will definitely become a real abode of God and well before then. So you see, we are all involved. We are all participants in the very beginnings of a very special history.
Jai Baba.